Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is the Direwolves of Winterfell, episode 6-13, Lost and Found, covering Jon's time after returning to Castle Black before reuniting with Ghost. A Storm of Swords, Jon 6. When Jon arrives at Castle Black, it becomes official that Ghost is missing and not just missed. "Where's your wolf?" Noy asked as they crossed the yard. "Ghost. I had to leave him when I climbed the wall. I'd hoped he'd make his way back here." "I'm sorry, lad. There's been no sign of him." Clearly, in this section of the book, the theme of separation is in the forefront. A Storm of Swords, Jon 7. He thinks of Ghost 2 times more in the next chapter, perhaps thinking he was lost forever, triggered by seeing Rast and by looking out on the stars. And he had made as many enemies as friends at Castle Black. Rast, for one. Jon had once threatened to have Ghost rip his throat out unless he stopped tormenting Samwell Tarly, and Rast did not forget things like that. Later that chapter. The west had gone the color of a blood bruise, but the sky above was cobalt blue, deepening to purple, and the stars were coming out. Jon sat between 2 merlins, with only a scarecrow for company, and watched the stallion gallop up the sky. Or was it the Horned Lord? He wondered where Ghost was now. He wondered about AGoT as well, and told himself that way lay madness. A Storm of Swords, Bran 4. Upon meeting Summer, Sam again recalls Ghost, and Summer seems to like Sam as much as Ghost has. "Skinchanger. King's blood." "He won't hurt you," Bran said. "That's Summer." "Jon said you all had wolves." Sam pulled off a glove. "I know Ghost." He held out a shaky hand, the fingers white and soft and fat as little sausages. Summer patted closer, sniffed them, and gave the hand a lick. That was when Bran made up his mind. "We'll go with you." A Storm of Swords, Jon 8. As time passes, Jon starts to really worry about Ghost, and his thoughts turn dark. He associates Ghost with a dream he has of Grey Wind and Robb being dead, also with the incident at Queen's Crown with Summer and Bran, worrying that he may have lost all of them. The cell was dark, the bed hard beneath him, his own bed he remembered, his own bed in his steward's cell beneath the old bear's chambers. By rights, it should have brought him sweeter dreams. Even beneath the furs, he was cold. Ghost had shared his cell before the ranging, warming it against the chill of night. And in the wild, AGoT had slept beside him, both gone now. He had burned AGoT himself, as he knew she would have wanted. And Ghost, where are you? Was he dead as well? Was that what his dream had meant? The bloody wolf in the crypts? But the wolf in the dream had been gray, not white. Gray, like Bran's wolf. Had the Thens hunted him down and killed him after Queen's Crown? If so, Bran was lost to him for good and all. A Storm of Swords, Jon 10. He again recalls Ghost during Stannis' attack, the thought triggered by Varamir and his wolves. Note also a bit of skin-changing lore exposed in this passage. Varamir's wolves still guard Jon while Varamir skin-changes the eagle and mutters what he sees under his breath. This shows how versatile skin-changing can be once mastered. The wolves are either compelled through the bond alone, or he is splitting his attention 4 ways, at least. Jon may need this ability going forward if he is to ride a dragon and maintain his bond with Ghost. Note also that Varamir screams at the end, an eagle's unnatural call, much like the scream of a dragon. I don't think this word choice is a coincidence. Jon took a step toward the tent, thinking of the Horn of Winter, but the Shadowcat blocked him, tail lashing. The beast's nostrils flared, and slaver ran from his curved front teeth. He smells my fear. He missed Ghost more than ever then. The 2 wolves were behind him growling. "Banners," he heard Varamir murmur. "I see golden banners. Oh." A mammoth lumbered by, trumpeting. A half-dozen bowmen in a wooden tower on its back. "The king. No." Then the Skinchanger threw back his head and screamed. A Storm of Swords, Samwell 4. Jon again laments the missing Ghost, telling Sam that he doesn't dream of Ghost anymore. It's no wonder, given that they are on opposite sides of the wall. Jon seems to know this too, At least it's hinted at in his subconscious thoughts in the dreams of Winterfell he's having in place of wolf dreams. The Warg, I've heard them call me. How can I be a Warg without a wolf, I ask you? His mouth twisted. I don't even dream of Ghost anymore. All my dreams are of the crypts, of the stone kings and their thrones. Sometimes I hear Robb's voice, and my father's, as if they were at a feast. But there's a wall between us, and I know that no place has been set for me. A Storm of Swords, Jon 11. As their reunion approaches, Jon has a final thought of Ghost while he's in the presence of Stannis, recalling him even in the past tense, and then remembering how Ghost found the dragonglass daggers. Stannis offers Jon Winterfell later in the same scene. Without hope of Ghost's return, Jon is prone to take the offer. Aye, all that and more. You are a warg, too, they say, a skinchanger who walks at night as a wolf. King Stannis had a hard smile. How much of it is true? I had a direwolf, Ghost. I left him when I climbed the wall near Greyguard, and have not seen him since. Qhorin Halfhand commanded me to join the wildlings. He knew that they would make me kill him to prove myself, and told me to do whatever they asked of me. The woman was named Ygritte. I broke my vows with her, but I swear to you on my father's name that I never turned my cloak. I believe you, the king said. Later that chapter. I know more than you might think, Jon Snow. I know it was you who found the dragonglass dagger that Randall Tarley's son used to slay the other. Ghost found it. The blade was wrapped in a ranger's cloak and buried beneath the fist of the first men. There were other blades as well, spearheads, arrowheads, all dragonglass. I know you held the gate here, King Stannis said. If not, I would have come too late. A Storm of Swords, Jon 12. Before Jon is reunited with Ghost, there is a scene that relates to Stannis' offer for Winterfell, Jon's penchant for underestimating his abilities, and, potentially, Ghost. He's training in the yard with Iron Emmett. Before this scene, Jon had mentioned that Emmett was a strong fighter, but Jon liked to think he gave as good as he got. We are led to believe that they were perhaps evenly matched, with Emmett maybe having the upper hand. I think Jon was underestimating his own ability in that assessment, given what he does to Emmett in the scene that follows. When Jon takes a heavy blow to the head, he has a vision relating to Robb's rights over Winterfell, and promptly annihilates Emmett. Chalk one up for Jon's true ability, perhaps augmented by magic? Telekinesis, anyone? Afterward, Jon can't understand his anger and his actions. Preston Jacobs thinks Ghost's nearness might be at play in this scene. He cites the fact that Jon tastes blood, similar to how Bran tastes blood when Summer tastes it. And Jacobs also speculates that Jon's contemplation of his own anger might be evidence of Jon mirroring Ghost. While mirroring is definitely a part of direwolf lore, I'm still skeptical, because it cannot be forgotten that Ghost was definitely north of the wall at this time. Also, I don't believe Ghost is ever really shown anger other than when he's mirroring Jon's anger. He was almost ready to lower his blade and call a halt when Emmett fainted low and came in over his shield with a savage forehand slash that caught Jon on the temple. He staggered, his helm and head both ringing from the force of the blow. For half a heartbeat, the world beyond his eye slit was a blur. And then the years were gone, and he was back at Winterfell once more, wearing a quilted leather coat in place of mail and plate. His sword was made of wood, and it was Robb who stood facing him, not Iron Emmett. Every morning they had trained together since they were big enough to walk, Snow and Stark, spinning and slashing about the wards of Winterfell, shouting and laughing, sometimes crying when there was no one else to see. They were not little boys when they fought, but knights and mighty heroes. I'm Prince Aemon the Dragon Knight, Jon would call out, and Robb would shout back, well, I'm Florian the Fool. Or Robb would say, I'm the young dragon, and Jon would reply, I'm Sir Ryam Redwine. That morning he called it first. I'm the Lord of Winterfell, he cried, as he had 100 times before. Only this time Robb had answered, you can't be the Lord of Winterfell. You're bastard-born. My lady mother says you can't ever be the Lord of Winterfell. I thought I had forgotten that. Jon could taste blood in his mouth from the blow he'd taken. In the end, Halder and Horse had to pull him away from Iron Emmett, one man on either arm. The ranger sat on the ground dazed, his shield half in splinters, the visor of his helm knocked askew, and his sword 6 yards away. Jon, enough, Halder was shouting. He's down, you disarmed him. Enough. No, not enough. Never enough. Jon let his sword drop. I'm sorry, he muttered. Emmett, are you hurt? Iron Emmett pulled his battered helm off. Was there some part of yield you cannot comprehend, Lord Snow? It was said amiably, though. Emmett was an amiable man, and he loved his song of swords. Warrior defend me, he groaned. Now I know how Qhorin Halfhand must have felt. That was too much. Jon wrenched free of his friends and retreated to the armory, alone. His ears were still ringing from the blow Emmett had dealt him. He sat on the bench and buried his head in his hands. Why am I so angry, he asked himself. But it was a stupid question. Lord of Winterfell. I could be the Lord of Winterfell, my father's heir. Given Ghost's nearness, I suppose it may be possible that feeling anger and the taste of blood from Ghost could leak through the wall, especially given the strength of the mirroring in the highlighted section in the paragraph I quote next. That said, tinfoil alert, there is another explanation we should consider. That a green seer, or even Ghost himself, used the weirwoods to affect Jon's mind and bring him north of the wall to retrieve Ghost. After all, to go north of the wall was Jon's next move. From Bran's story, we know that telepathic communication beyond the wall can be successful for weirwoods, and that makes perfect sense given that there is a weirwood literally embedded in the wall at the Black Gate. As we see in the next passage, Ghost comes out of the haunted forest, so it is entirely possible that the weirwoods influenced Jon. Remember how in another instance in A Dance with Dragons, Bran tastes the blood from an ancient blood sacrifice at Winterfell in a tree vision. Anger is also a theme of weirwood interaction as well. Just look at some of the descriptions of the weirwood faces. Lastly, the scene in Jon's vision is exactly the type of thing Bran sees when starting his Green Seer training. Could Ghost have been in the weirwood net during his long absence? Perhaps Ghost's thoughts, or maybe his feelings, such as hunger or the taste of prey, were sent to Jon. If this literally was the case, Emmett was just an innocent bystander. Poor guy. Regardless, the mirroring once Jon goes north of the wall in the next scene is extreme. More than anything we've seen before through Jon and Ghost's bond, at least while waking. Jon realizes the implication of the mirroring and knows that Ghost is near. The affection of their reunion needs no interpretation, but I will mention that we were right to think Jon thought Ghost dead in the prior chapter, as he mentions it here. He wanted it. Jon knew then. He wanted it as much as he'd ever wanted anything. I've always wanted it, he thought guiltily. May the gods forgive me. It was a hunger inside him, sharp as a dragonglass blade. A hunger. He could feel it. It was food he needed, prey, red deer that stank of fear, or a great elk proud and defiant. He needed to kill and fill his belly with fresh meat and hot, dark blood. His mouth began to water with the thought. It was a long moment before he understood what was happening. When he did, he bolted to his feet. Ghost? He turned around toward the wood, and there he came, padding silently out of the green dusk, the breath coming warm and white from his open jaws. Ghost, he shouted, and the direwolf broke into a run. He was leaner than he had been, but bigger as well, and the only sound he made was the soft crunch of dead leaves beneath his paws. When he reached Jon, he leapt, and they wrestled amidst the brown grass and long shadows as the stars came out above them. God's wolf, where have you been? Jon said when Ghost stopped worrying at his forearm. I thought you'd died on me, like Robb and AGoT and all the rest. I had no sense of you, not since I climbed the wall, not even in dreams. The direwolf had no answer, but he licked Jon's face with a tongue like a wet rasp, and his eyes caught the last light and shone like two great red suns. Ghost's eyes feature prominently at the end of that passage, compared to suns, so the burning motif is back. Note that this is a contrast to typical albinos in real life, where their eyes can be red, yes, but they are only red because they lack pigment. So they take their coloring only from the blood that runs through them. Further, because of this phenomenon, albinos typically have assorted vision problems. Ghost suffers from none of that. His eyes burn red, and they are deep, like a weirwood. As if to confirm this, the next paragraph makes that connection again. He had a weirwood's eyes. This comparison does a few things for me. 1. It reinforces my earlier argument that Jon's actions in the yard earlier this chapter were probably influenced by a weirwood. 2. It reminds me of Ghost's textual connection to other telepathically special entities that we've discussed before. Bloodraven, Melisandre, the Ghost of Highheart, the White Ravens, and the Weirwoods. None of these needs to be a true albino for the comparison to hold. In fact, there is ample variation among the lot,
as we've discussed before. Jon even makes a contrast between Ghost's eyes and Mel's in the next passage that follows. 3. It strengthens my conviction in the argument that Ghost is telepathically special due to his red eyes. In fact, I'll take it one step further. I think Ghost is the equivalent of a green seer among direwolves. Note also that just before this, Jon seemingly determined that he would take Stannis' offer. All it took was seeing Ghost and noting the comparison to the trees that reverses this course. Note that when Stannis made this offer, Melisandre urged him to burn these weirwoods and accept Winterfell. This conflation no doubt weighs heavily in Jon's decision at this point.
Red eyes, Jon realized, but not like Melisandre's. He had a weirwood's eyes, red mouth, red fur, blood and bone, like a heart tree. He belongs to the old gods, this one. And he alone, of all the dire wolves, was white. 6 pups they'd found in the late summer snows. Him and Robb. 5 that were gray, black and brown. 5 for the 5 Starks, and 1 white, as white as snow. He had his answer then.
Of course, Jon could be completely wrong. Perhaps it's an indication of his true parentage. Targaryen parentage. Not his bastard blood. It's probably both that and the weirwood comparison. As Jon re-enters Castle Black, we get a few more reminders of our direwolf bond themes. First, Jon is now aware of the mirroring of Ghost's appetite upon him. This may come into play later. Note that Stannis' men mentioned that the brothers are having food withheld in the aim of driving them to choose a Lord Commander once and for all. Then, there are 2 reactions by these men to Ghost. First awe, and later a scowl. Both are probably mixed with fear, reminding us of that theme. Also, recall that Ghost has grown. He is perhaps full grown by now. That can only augment that fear and awe. The scowl is probably also related to the rumor around the garrison that Jon is a warg. Stannis mentioned that at the time of his offer, too.
Beneath the wall, the Queen's men were kindling their night fire. He saw Melisandre emerge from the tunnel with the king beside her to lead the prayers she believed would keep the dark away. Come, Ghost, Jon told the wolf. With me. You're hungry. I know. I could feel it. They ran together for the gate, circling wide around the night fire, where reaching flames clawed at the black belly of the night. The king's men were much in evidence in the yards of Castle Black. They stopped as Jon went by and gaped at him. None of them had ever seen a direwolf before, he realized, and Ghost was twice as large as the common wolves that prowled their southern greenwoods. As he walked toward the armory, Jon chanced to look up and saw Val standing in her tower window. I'm sorry, he thought. I'm not the man to steal you out of there. In the practice yard, he came upon a dozen kingsmen with torches and long spears in their hands. Their sergeant looked at Ghost and scowled, and a couple of his men lowered their spears until the knight who led them said, "Move aside and let them pass." To Jon, he said, "You're late for your supper."
As Jon enters the hall, his friends, starting with Pip, are overjoyed to see him. Not so for Janos Slynt, who throws the rumor of Jon being a warg out for all to hear. This must have angered Jon, and Ghost either mirrored this anger or sensed the threat that Slynt was and bared his fangs. As if to prove the truth of the accusation, Jon calms the wolf at a touch. Recall that Ghost was projecting his appetite upon Jon, and that all the brothers were being deprived of food. This is the backdrop of the scene. Preston Jacobs suggests that Ghost and the Lord Commander's Raven are doing the same in his The Rigged Election of Jon Snow series. I tend to agree with this part of his conjecture. If Ghost and the Raven were to project hunger on all the men in the same way Jon is feeling it, that would make the men desperate to complete the election. Indeed, Jon's projection of calmness might have averted a riot in place of an election. I take the Raven's utterances and the zeal to bring food afterward for proof that appetite played some role in Jon's choosing. To conclude that there was outside influence on the choosing, you need only to look to the mystery of how the bird was put in the choosing kettle. Pip's question is easily answered under the assumption that Lord Commander Bloodraven was skin-changing the bird. It's still his bird. That said, I also agree with Preston that Dolores Ed was the one who put the bird in the kettle.
Pip was the first to see Jon. He grinned at the sight of Ghost, put 2 fingers in his mouth, and whistled as only a mummer's boy could whistle. The shrill sound cut through the clamor like a sword. As Jon walked toward the tables, more of the brothers took note and fell quiet. A hush spread across the cellar, until the only sounds were Jon's heels clicking the stone floor and the soft crackle of logs in the hearth.
Later,
Lord Janos was red-faced and quivering. "The beast," he gasped. "Look, the beast that tore the life from Half-Hand. A warg walks among us, brothers, a warg. This creature is not fit to lead us. This beastling is not fit to live." Ghost bared his teeth, but Jon put a hand on his head. "My lord," he said, "will you tell me what's happened here?" Maester Aemond answered from the far end of the hall. "Your name has been put forth as Lord Commander, Jon."
Later.
"Supper," screamed the raven. "Supper! Supper!" The king's men cleared the door when they told them of the choosing, and Three-Finger Hob and half a dozen helpers went trotting off to the kitchen to fetch the food. Jon did not wait to eat. He walked across the castle, wondering if he were dreaming, with the raven on his shoulder and Ghost at his heels. Pip, Gren, and Sam trailed after him, chattering, but he hardly heard a word until Gren whispered, "Sam did it." And Pip said, "Sam did it." Pip had brought a wineskin with him, and he took a long drink and chanted, "Sam, Sam, Sam the wizard, Sam the wonder, Sam, Sam the marvel man." He did it. "But when did you hide the raven in the kettle, Sam? And how in 7 hells could you be certain it would fly to Jon? It would have mucked up everything if the bird had decided to perch on Janos Slint's fat head." "I had nothing to do with the bird," Sam insisted. "When it flew out of the kettle, I almost wet myself."
Clearly, Bloodraven was inside the bird when it flew to Jon's arm. So that concludes our discussion of A Storm of Swords. This volume began with Ghost and Jon being quite close physically and in their bond, surrounded by enemies. Through their later separation, Jon felt extremely lonely at the seeming loss of his wolf. It seems that the isolation may have strengthened their bond, though, given how much Jon's feelings indicate that he missed the wolf. Imagine that thinking about and worrying about the missing wolf also helped Jon to learn to reach out mentally for his companion. Ghost may have also strengthened his own telepathic abilities in the same way. This improved strength in their bond was apparent in their reunion. Alright, next time we'll discuss Jon and Ghost in A Dance with Dragons.
So high the wall above my eyes.
Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video.
The morning rise. Songs of love, her bell I'd ring in the window, but lies should see.
Thanks especially to those of my family who helped in this series so far.
The shade of the wall so high. It's so lonely.
If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.